Welcome to the Music Licensing and Sync Placement panel. This is sponsored by Sync Musica, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about Sync Musica first and myself. My name is Jessica Alvarez. My friends call me Jessie. And welcome. Sync Musica is going to be an exclusive hub based out of Miami that will represent songs and music for Latinx composers, producers, and also for songwriters, okay? There will be a way that you can become a member. You can sign up for a subscription that will give you benefits to mentors, such as the ones you have sitting here, and workshops, and lawyers, such as the ones we have sitting in the audience as well. And it will also, once you sign up for a membership, give you an opportunity to be considered, to be represented, to be pitched for sync placement in movies, gaming, TV, and advertisements. Does that sound like a great idea, everybody? Okay. Thank you very much. And as I was on a panel yesterday for the Pro-Am Hip Hop Expo, Don De Niro said this is the best thing that has happened for songwriters and producers in a long time, as well as for the people that are looking for music and material. Give you a little bit of my background. Most of you know me that I've been a performing artist as well as a composer. Had the privilege and the blessing during the pandemic to have a song on feature in Netflix series Gentified, and also 6 original compositions in Amazon Prime Movie, which happened thank you to the Miami Wet Fest 3 years ago doing a network event. So I tell you that if you're here to network, this is the place to be. Yes. And so definitely, let's give it up for Miami Wet Fest for having us here, because this is definitely a great opportunity. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panel. But before I get started, how many of you have been how many of you, first of all, know what sync placement is? Raise your hands. Okay, we have one because you're a lawyer. We have one. Okay, music licensing. Raise your hands. Okay, excellent. How many of you are film directors or producers? Okay, and how many of you out there are composers, songwriters? Okay, so we have a few. Okay, so we have a mix. We have ladies, what do you think? We have a mix of people out there. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce the ladies. I'm going to introduce them by names, and then they're going to real quick say a little bit about themselves in a brief, what I call the elevator pitch. Everybody knows what that is. And I'm going to go ahead and say their names, and you can go ahead and introduce yourself. Right here, we do have a dear friend, and this is Darlene Rodriguez. Everybody, please give her a hand.
Wow. We can wait for everyone to be introduced. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm Darlene Rodriguez. I head up sync licensing and merchandising for Sony Music Latin.
We have Amy Rowland.
Hi. Thanks for taking your Saturday to join us. I head up sync and new business for Sony Music Publishing's Latin America and U.S. Latin markets.
We have Gabby.
Hi, I'm happy to be here. My name is Gabriela Camargo. I work at Sony Pictures Television as Senior Manager of Business Affairs. And actually, well, I'm very happy, even though this is a small crowd, but we are happy to be with you guys and share our knowledge.
Excellent. And we have Sira.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for resisting the lure of our tempting beaches and being indoors on such a beautiful day. I'm Cira Veciana. I'm Vice President of Business Affairs at Sony Pictures Entertainment, and I support our cable networks in Latin America in original productions, as well as our faith-based SVOD service called PureFlix.
A nice round of applause for all these ladies, and you can give them another round of applause at the end of this panel. I'm going to ask you ladies just to move your microphones just a little bit closer to you, and so that way everybody can hear you, because that's always the one thing when I go to a conference, I'm like, I can't hear them, and I want to hear everything they have to say, and I'm sure you do as well. So we're going to go ahead and make sure that they can hear everything. As we get started, we are going to have the label and the publishing, Sony Music Publishing and Sony Label. Go ahead, Label Entertainment, go ahead and explain to you the basic 101 of sync publishing music licensing. And take your notes and get your pens and papers ready, or make sure you're recording.
All right. Thank you, Jesse. So I'm sure some of you are familiar, although I didn't see too many hands in terms of whether or not you're familiar with the process that needs to take place in order to license a song. So I thought, okay, I think it might be beneficial just to take you through all of the terms that are really important for us in order to negotiate a fee or a fair quote when you want to license a song. When I first started in the music licensing business, the first thing I learned was that each song has two owners. There are the publishers that represent the artists, the composers, and the writers, and then you've got the music label that owns the master recording of that song. So if you want to license a song, you must get both approval from both entities, the publishers as well as the music label. I work on this side over here, the music label. So I'm going to take you through that process of what I usually go through anytime anyone comes to me and says, "Hey, I want to license this song, Darlene." And the good news is that while my amazing counterpart on the publishing side, Amy here, a lot of the terms that I'm going to be talking about today are the exact same terms that publishing also requests. So about 85% of the terms that I'm going to go through right now are the exact same terms that Amy would ask for. The only difference is that there are certain nuances that are specific to publishing that I wouldn't deal with at all as the master recording side. So maybe, Amy, you'll talk a little bit about what those nuances are. So just having my little notes here, make sure I don't forget anything. So anyways, let's go through those terms that I think are really important for everyone to understand. The first is, it's almost like the what. What is the song that you're planning on licensing? Who is the artist? And who's the record label that owns that master recording? Sometimes I'll get a call and say, "Hey, Darlene, I'd like to license a song for Luis Fonsi." And I'm like, "I love him. He's amazing. He's not ours." So basically, please make sure that you know who the record label...
We will pause on that, however, and say he is ours.
He is with Sony Publishing. He's not with us, but we want him.
He is on Sony Music Publishing. We're very, very happy to have Fonsi and Despacito.
Yes. So always make sure that you know who the repertoire owner is. Then it's the who, the licensee. Who is seeking to license the song? So is it an agency? Is it a person? Is it a client? Is it, very important for us to know who is seeking to license the song. All the paperwork will be done, and our lawyers over here will tell you how important that is as well. So to know who's going to be licensing the song. Then we have the production name, right? So if it's a movie, if it's a TV series, which is a project that you're working on that we need to make sure we include in all the documentation. Then the budget. The projects, there are some projects that are $10,000 overall, right? And then you have some that go into the millions of dollars. So it's really important for us to understand the budget that you're working with so we can come up with a fair quote, whether it's for a project that's $10,000 or a project that's $2 million. We have to come up with something that's fair for everybody. So we usually ask for the budget of the film. Then we go into the where, the media. Where are you going to be placing this song? Is it TV? Is it broadcast? Is it cable? Is it on digital? Is it on a video game? Really important, or is it all of the above? Really important for us to understand where the song is going to be placed. Then we go into the synopsis. Once we know, okay, it's going to be, a movie, then give us an overall understanding of what the movie is going to be about, right? So we get a gist of it. Just, let's get a clearer understanding of how the music is going to be used, which will take us to the next step, which is a description of the scene or a brief. If it's a commercial, what is the brief of what that commercial looks like? Or if it's a movie or a TV series, then give us a description of the scene for a lot of reasons. One, we want to make sure it makes sense, right? But two, more importantly, Many of our artists may have some certain standards or policies in terms of how their music is being used. So, for example, if it's a scene where there's drug addiction, violence, something that the artist doesn't feel comfortable with, then it's something, obviously that's why we need to know exactly how the music is going to be used in the scene, or else the artist may not approve it. From there, we go to the type of use. So now we understand the scene. How is it being used? Is it going to be in the background, kind of low, you hear it, the characters are speaking, or is the character actually singing the song on that scene? And then you can also think about, is it a transition from one scene to another? That's the song we're going to be using for transitioning from one side to the other. All of those different uses have different weight because it has a certain importance to that scene. So that is all of these, like I said, all of these points are really important for us to really assess what a fair fee would be for the use of that song. So that's the type of use. Then, and I know that a lot of this sounds commonsensical, but unless you are familiar with music licensing, you don't think about these terms that you need to make sure you have defined. So the next one is duration of the music. Do you want to use 5 seconds, or are you going to use the entire song? That always tells you, okay, you know what? 3 seconds is one thing, using the entire song is another. Going then to moving on to the term. Do you need that for 1 week? Is it for a year? Or is it in perpetuity? Again, common sense tells us, well, if it's a year, it's one fee. If it's in perpetuity, it's another. Now, depending on the media, there are a couple of exceptions that are made. For example, and my colleagues here will talk a little bit about that. But for the most part, that's why it's really important for us to understand the term. How long do you need that term? Then we go into territory. I know, like I said, yes, Arlene, we understand that, the bigger the area, but it is very important for us to know, is it worldwide, or is it just for the US? Is it the state of Florida? Last week, we granted a license for just the southern part of Florida. So, of course, a fee for a license for the southern part of Florida is going to be very different than something that you're going to use worldwide. So these are all the aspects and those pieces of the puzzle that we have to analyze and figure out and assess what is going to be the right fee and the right quote for that usage. Then the release date. You're clearing the song today, June, right? But the movie doesn't release until December of this year. So if it's a 6-month license that you're looking for, then obviously we need to know that term that it's going to start in December of this year, not June of this year, right? And it'll move on to for the 6 months. I'm almost done, because you guys are all going to be experts, right? In about 5 more minutes, everyone's going to go after my job. I know it. I just know it. Okay. So options. Now, this one is actually optional. It's not required, but it's always good to have to plan ahead of time. So let's say you want to license a song for 6 months, right? But if it's a campaign and it's doing really well, hey, Darlene, if the campaign does well, we may want to extend that term another 6 months. So what you do is you negotiate ahead of time that extension. And I mean, there are a lot of benefits to negotiating that ahead of time, but I think one of the most important ones, and the lawyers here will tell you that as well, is in case you do decide, you know what, it did really great, we're going to go ahead and extend it, you don't have to go back to the table and negotiate the additional 6 months. It's already there, good to go. We're all happy because it's less work for all of us. You may decide to exercise it or not, but you have the option to do so. And the last thing I have on my list here is the fee. Usually, we like to ask, okay, so what fee do you have for licensing? Even though on our end, we're going to go ahead and, based on all these other facts, negotiate a number. But at the end of the day, we say, well, Darlene, you're charging me $1 million for this. I usually charge $1 million. No, I don't. No, but I'd like to. However, I only have $10,000. So I'm exaggerating, obviously. So it's a matter of, I'm here, you're here. Let's come back to the table and see where we can meet somewhere in the middle to make sure you're happy and we're happy with this final negotiation. The one thing I do want to mention about the fee is 85% of the time, the fees that we usually give are we'll say MFN with publishing. So let's say the fee is $5,000 and you're the client. I'm like, okay, so your fee is for this license is going to be $5,000 MFN with publishing. What does MFN mean? MFN is really stands for Most Favored Nations, but it's a very fancy way to say we both get the same amount of money. That's what that means. So if I come to you and I say, listen, this is going to be $5,000 MFN, that means you pay me $5,000 as well as the publishing, the record label, as well as publishing, we each get $5,000. It really ensures parity between the rights owners. So now you are all experts, but I thought it was a really good, I thought it was very beneficial to sort of set this standard for everyone to get an understanding. As we go through the next part of this conversation, you keep those points in mind because they really dictate a lot of how we negotiate and we go through this process. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Darlene, for those basics. And I think you hit it on the mark. I think she exactly got to some very interesting basic points. I have a question, actually, which I think is going to affect everybody. So the usage and the placement, so the usage and where the song is used, will determine what is paid to the music creators and also determines what, it's a question, also determines what the independent film producer will have to pay? Who will pay that amount?
Yeah, the production will have to pay for it.
So the production will pay that
Production
amount.
will have to pay, and there's various factors. I mean, Darlene was very thorough, so there's not a whole lot that will expand on the on those basics. But I think just to clarify a few points, certainly factors include the duration of the use. Is it over end credits? That's a big one. Opening credits. It also depends on the song. If you've got a big iconic song, if you want to license All You Need Is Love, it's not going to cost the same as an emerging artist song. This is a big, huge one. Another thing that we as a publisher would look at is what recording are you using? Are you using a master recording? Are you re-recording? Is it talent on camera that's recording it? All of that. Now, the song still has a value, especially if it's a big, iconic song. And once again, then you go to the use, the duration of the use, and all of that. I think our audience is mainly film and TV, is that right? Not a whole lot of advertising. So we'll talk more to that.
How many film industry people, directors, producers? Okay, so we've got about 3. And how many in the music industry? Raise your hands. Okay,
So it's good for those of you who are writers and artists to know what you need to look out for protecting your assets. And then obviously the producers and directors, kind of the information to make sure that you're not using a song that hasn't been properly cleared, which I dealt with that this week. That was interesting. We get an email from one of our songwriters and, hey, by the way, I just heard my song and here's the clip. And that was a whole another topic of conversation. But when we look at film and TV, media rights usually are going to be all media. We'll often, depending on the fee and the budgets you have, and when we ask for budgets, we do want to know the total film budget, not what you've allocated to music. Generally speaking, 10% of the budget should be allocated to music if it's a decent budget for that film. If it's a really, really low budget, that might not even be enough. So then, when I talk to my colleagues over here, we know that all media, like we said, always and in perpetuity, right? The thing is, the cost for all media in perpetuity might be higher than an indie film budget can absorb. And so then we start looking at, well, what options do we have? We could do film festivals, for example. We can give 2 years of festival rights at a much lower fee, and then you're going to have those options that Darlene referred to, renewal options. We can also do options for commercial releases. We can do step deals. There's a lot of different ways that we can work within budgets, but it's important to have that kind of clear picture of what we're looking at. And it's definitely something you do want to negotiate upfront, because if you haven't, and then it becomes a huge project, but for whatever reason, it's gone viral and everybody's talking about it, but you still don't have the dollars behind it, the chances are that price is going to be higher. There could also be a case where, I don't know, if we look at some of our pop songs, some of our urban songs have 12 writers on it. All of a sudden, 2 of those writers are in a fight, and now one of them will not approve a song for any reason. Those are the kinds of scenarios you're going to avoid if you go ahead and get options in it from the get-go. So the other little piece of it, I think, that's different than what Darlene mentioned is on the publishing, you can have actually several rights holders. You can have, like I said, 10 songwriters. You can have 2 songwriters. You can have 1. depending on that scenario, you can also have multiple publishers. It's important that you not only clear both rights, but all parts of each of those rights. It can happen on the label as well. You have a featured artist, you can have to clear a feature. But it's important that you really have a clear understanding of how you need to use the song or how you want to use the song. You know, kind of have that information, share it. We understand confidentiality. We're not out there sending people's information. You know, how many times have we gotten requests and said, oh, it's confidential, I can't tell you. Well, unfortunately, then I can't quote because I can't, in good faith, do that to my songwriter. Darlene can't, in good faith, do that to her artist. So those are some things I think that's pretty much touched on the basic. If if there's questions, we can have to answer.
Thank you, Amy. I know because we in the past working with a lot of composers and songwriters, I know that the word perpetuity makes them a little nervous. Could you go a little bit more into that as one question? What is perpetuity exactly going to entail? Does that mean they're giving away their song? Because when I said that to them, they go, oh my God, I'm not giving away my song. Are you crazy? So forever and ever, perpetuity is one thing. And the other thing is there's a lot of myths and a lot of mystery around publishing. You know, there's always a lot of mystery about the word publishing. It's like this taboo and this secret thing that they don't quite understand. Could you touch on perpetuity so a lot of the songwriters are not freaking out about giving their songs forever? And then could you also touch upon basically the other question that I asked? Please, thank you. And get a little closer to the mic.
Is our audience mostly U.S. origin, or do we have some people from outside of the United States? Outside, where from? Jamaica. Welcome
I just
to Miami.
got back from Jamaica.
And I asked that, and I don't know Jamaican law, but I asked that because in the United States, we use the term perpetuity. That just basically means forever. And all media, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys are usually asking for all media now known hereafter devised these days, right?
Yes.
That basically is because 20 years ago, you would say all media, and nobody understood that all of these digital medias could be devised. And all media existing at that time did not cover digital rights. Now people had to go in and clear films that were, and you can imagine, we just touched on some of the challenges of doing that. So perpetuity is pretty much forever. I asked on the territory of origin of people here to see where the productions were coming out of. There are countries in the world where you cannot use the term perpetuity. You say life of copyright because it is the duration of the copyright. You know, it cannot be copywritten past a certain date. So it pretty much means the same thing as long as the song is there. Now, you asked, or you touched on a point that's key, and you said you're giving it away. First of all, I'm going to recommend you don't ever give it away. There should always be some sort of a fee. There should be some sort of a fee. Beyond that, you are licensing it. You are not giving. You are not assigning copyright. Yes, there are exceptions. It would be very long. We don't have enough time in this panel to go into what would be work for hires for films. That would be more for scores, for original themes created for the film in general. And then, yes, you would be assigning your rights over. But in general, licensing, which is what we're focusing on today, you're not giving away rights. You're licensing it. You're letting them use it for this specific use. That's why we've asked for all the details. Where is it going to be used? How is it going to be used? That means if you say we're going to use 30 seconds in the film where Mary and Juan are dancing together, that's the use you have to, you have the authority under that license to use. If you decide to now throw that over end credits, you're likely going to get a call from somebody and say, well, that's not covered in the license. We need to go back to the table and negotiate. And that's if somebody's in a friendly mood, because you could also get a letter saying, hey, that's not what we agreed to. We don't want it to be used that way, not end credits. But if all of a sudden that scene changed, as Darlene referenced earlier, now you've got some kind of content that the artist doesn't want to approve, the songwriter doesn't want to approve, well, then it could be a different situation. Publishing. What publishing questions? I mean, that would be another long...
Yeah, that publishing is a long conversation. But at the end, I know a lot of you have publishing questions, and make sure that you step up and ask them, because this is a lady right here that can tell you the ins and outs. Take advantage of that opportunity, because publishing is a huge thing. Okay, and I want to make sure real quick that I let a lot of the songwriters know, and producers out there that make music, it's very important that you own or hopefully own three things. Okay, if you're the writer, that you own your publishing, and if you're not registered with a publisher or signed to a record label, and that you own your masters. But if you don't know who owns your masters, find out. If the producer owns your masters or your record label owns your masters, find out. Those three things, you should know who owns them. If you don't own all three, find out who owns them, because these ladies right here are not going to touch you with a 10-foot pole unless you have all three under your control or know who has them. Okay, so it's your, what is it? Your writers, your publishing, and your masters. Thank you so much, Amy. Later on, ask Amy about publishing, because she is definitely the queen.
I'm just gonna make a parenthesis here. There's a couple of things that I don't think we've touched on, and that is, I am not at liberty to accept unsolicited material, so I will say that right now, and I don't, that's not personal, we just are not accepting it. I don't think any of the ladies are, but I know that on the publishing, we're not. If there are beginning songwriters in the group, because I know that usually in these kinds of events there are, I know that one of the big questions we get is, well, how can we get in? You're not accepting unsolicited material. I met you here, you can talk, but you're not accepting. One of the first pieces of business that I can say as a songwriter to get in business is make sure you're affiliated to your PRO. In the United States, we're looking at ASCAP, BMI, CSAC. There's a new one, but ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC are basically the three. You should go meet with the teams. Make sure the team you build around yourself you are comfortable with, that they're looking out for your best interest, that together you guys are working for this. Make sure that you understand what you're signing, always. And that would go for not just songwriters, that's, producers, everything. When you look at your license, I see a head nod. That's our resident lawyer here, right? I mean, it's important, and if not, do hire professionals to take a look at that. So that's what I can say as a really quick 101.
And the PRO is important because they'll get paid through their PROs, the publishers and the songwriters, correct?
Well,
or not always.
That would be performance income that the PROs collect, but they also are connected. So that's also a relationship, and then it can be a source that can give you a referral. They can kind of vet through those first parts, and then they can say, hey, Amy, I've got this really great songwriter that I'd like you to take a listen to their material. And if it's coming from someone we know that it's legit, and chances are we will take that meeting.
Thank you, Amy. And so definitely you need to network and also have a reliable source. Once again, I'm going to reiterate what Amy said. Please be respectful at the end of the panel when you come to speak to these wonderful ladies, which I'm calling the Sync Superwomen of Sony today. I gave them that name. They're superheroes in my book. And make sure that you are respectful and no unsolicited material from any of the creators, please. Okay? Thank you. We appreciate that. And this time, I think we're going to go ahead and let Gabby talk about what she does.
Well, it's very interesting because now that we have the knowledge of basics, or the 101 of label and publishing, now we can talk about placement of the music and how we do it. And actually having the opportunity of working with production, TV production pretty much, has given me the facts on how actually it's done. And it's pretty much, this process starts from scripts. I mean, since our writers are developing the scripts until post-production. I mean, it's a long process, and actually it's a huge team involved in the whole process, coming from writers, from music supervisors, from directors, producers. So pretty much there is a definition of what is going to be the genre of the project. I mean, what's going to be like the main tone of that music that we would like to have. And then also even we have the development of music taste for each particular character. So it's very interesting because it comes with the psychology of the character itself in terms of what's the profile, what would be the music taste for that character. So not only we have like a general genre of for the TV show, but we also have like particular profiles, particular characters that they need a particular piece of music. So it's a long process and a lot of approvals in the middle. And it doesn't matter whether it's going to be an emerging artist or it's going to be an iconic song or it's going to be like I don't know, something unknown. It's just a matter to fit that music with the project. So once that we have, well, actually our content and music department have everything in place, it's when we start negotiating with our ladies here from label or pretty much publishing always, label sometimes, because sometimes we decide in terms of, because of the budget or creative initiatives inside the project, we decide sometimes to develop or produce our own covers. But there are some cases that we require the original master, so we negotiate the master as well. So it's pretty much a long process, and it's involved a lot of approvals. And just following up with Amy's comments in regards to unsolicited materials, my recommendation for you is just to take the opportunity of these kind of events to meet people and try to develop relationships, because actually what I have seen is that producers and directors that we hire to our projects, they bring the ideas of, I have worked with this person, I love this musician because he understands exactly my taste, or the way how I work. So usually those people, directors or producers of our shows, are the ones bringing those recommendations or suggestions. So we are not, for example, in my place, we are not the one making decisions on what is the music that we're going to have, or who is going to be the person developing the music for the show. No, usually that comes with a director or producer that we hire. So that's just a suggestion for you in order to, to start just taking advantage of these kind of events, start the networking process, because that helps.
Thank you so much, Gabby. Appreciate your knowledge. And we say the best for last, or?
So imagine I'm basically
Sira.
representing the network, and the network, just to be clear, it could be anything from ABC, NBC, it could be Amazon, it could be Netflix. And so many times as a network, let's say I'm Amazon, I will engage Gabi's production company to produce an Amazon original or a Netflix original. And as part of that process, we have creative approval over everything that her production company does. So for a lot of you that are producers or directors, think about, when you do have an idea that's picked up to Netflix or to Amazon and it hasn't already been made, if they're picking it up as an original, they're gonna want all the creative approvals, and that includes the music. So a lot of times we may say, like I have a project that we're doing for Amazon, and they wanted a series of cameos in each episode of the series. And one of the cameos is actually an emerging artist off the Warner label. And so Amazon will tell us, well, I want this individual's, the production company may propose different emerging artists that fit the profile, as Gabi mentioned. And at that time, Amazon, through us, through Sony, because we're also a production partner, will decide, well, we this is sort of like our first choice, this is our second choice. And then we begin to negotiate with the label, not just to have that artist integrated as an actual character in the, a cameo character in the series, but also to have him perform a song. And then that's when we start having additional conversations with Amy, or I should say, Gabby starts having additional conversations with Amy. So a lot of times there's a lot, these deals can take a lot of complexity, because you're not just using the song, but we may say, well, we really want this artist to promote the series. Would they be willing to promote it on social media? Would they be willing to put it on their fan page and drive tune-in to Amazon? And then before you know it, it could become a much more bigger endorsement and a much more bigger project than just like a sync license. So it's always something to keep in mind, specifically if you're a performer. It's less important, I think, if you're a composer. But in the end, the composer, a lot of the artists aren't necessarily the only composer on their music, or at all. So there's always an opportunity for the composer, because whether we decide to use the master, or in this particular case for this Amazon series, the artist will be performing one of his songs on the show. And then he's also performing 2 songs that our music team and the production company composed. So those 2 songs are original compositions. We don't need to license them from a publisher, but the original song that was his and that he co-wrote with somebody else does need to be cleared and licensed from the publisher. And we're having conversations with the label as well, because the label not just represents the artist, but they have the exclusive right to record that artist. So we can't have that artist appear in the movie, I'm sorry, in the series in this particular case, without the label signing off. So you could see that there could be a lot of different situations where you have all the different parties. And it's sometimes we're seeing a lot more musicians and performers that want to cross over also into acting and taking on roles, whether minor or major roles. And this is one of the ways to do it as well.
To Sierra's point, yes. It's something that we're seeing a lot recently too, that, because the record label does, this is the best way I like to explain it to people. We own whatever comes out of that artist's mouth. If they're working with a third party, we own that. In other words, so if he or she wants to perform a song in a TV series, then there needs to be, we need to draft a label waiver agreement that will allow that artist. So it's not a sync license, but it is an agreement that will allow the artist to perform that song in that series. So we do work with both. You're absolutely right, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Sarah, I have a question for you. How difficult does your job become when you have several writers on a production and you have several composers? What does that look like?
It could be difficult. Like on most productions, there is a music supervisor that is doing so we'll give the music supervisor the parameters under which he must license all the compositions and the masters. And if there's anything that kind of falls out of that pattern, they have to come to me and we have to then review it. And if there's some kind of exceptional request from the label or the composer, then we actually have at Sony a music legal department. And the music legal department is huge. It's like 40 team members. Not all attorneys, but because it includes people that pay out royalties, that pay out profit participations. There's all kinds of complex, especially for very well-known artists and composers. And they'll vet some of these exceptions because we do have studio policy as to what we can and cannot accept. So that's normally how it works on my part. I don't know, Gabi, if you
pretty much, yeah. It's very similar. It's the same policy, and actually we rely on that music team in Los Angeles, but pretty much we have like a set of standards for our productions, and it's all media, perpetuity, worldwide. That's our standard. And sometimes, for example, when you are dealing with different composers, different writers, it's really hard to imagine that sometimes they don't agree to those terms. Sometimes they say, I don't want that placement to go worldwide, or I don't want, perpetuity. So sometimes we need to think in a plan B, because for us, pretty much it's not an option. Less than those terms is not an option. And we have done that.
Yeah. I think the bigger challenge we run up on is, does the budget cover those rights? Especially when we look at, I know we've had a couple iconic songs. Sometimes an artist, a songwriter in this case, would not want the use for whatever reason. They just don't see the vision. It's no exposure for them at that point when there's at the level that some of them are at,
Exactly.
So that's what it is. But most of the times, I would say 95% of the time, we get the song that we want.
Most of the time.
It's conversations, and that's, I think, we all have a lot of conversations ongoing, and it's really, we all understand what each other needs at this point, but that's important when we start out, is understanding the needs of both parties. And then it's having those conversations and meeting in the middle, like, where can we find the common ground?
Exactly.
And rarely is never going to happen. Usually you can find a way. Like, I know the question comes up also on songwriters. They're signed to a major publisher. There's an exclusive agreement, but I want them to create an original track. Can it happen? Well, yeah, we just have to negotiate. Then that becomes a writer lending services agreement. So it's a different kind of agreement. But yes, you can do it just like we can do label waivers and everything else. So.
And let me add, a lot of what we're discussing right now is it's when the program is still in the process of being produced.
Yes.
You know, the conversations that go between the label, the publisher, the producer, and the network. But like most of the major studios, and whether it's Amazon or Netflix, a lot of times they will acquire programming, whether it's a film or a series that's already produced, right? What we call the print, or in Spanish we call it la lata, which is, you know, the old term for, like, you know, when the reels were put in those metal cases, and that's why it's called the lata. But the reality is, if you guys have produced a series or a film that began on YouTube and you now get it picked up, whether it's to Netflix or even to one of the big studios that's willing to distribute it elsewhere or in other territories, they're going to make sure, they're going to require a whole series of documentation from you. It's called the chain of title, to ensure that you actually have all the rights that you say you do. And if they're going to distribute that content on your behalf, one of the things that they're going to make sure is that you have all the licenses and all the syncs and all the master use for all the music.
Thank you so much, Sierra. Thank you. So if you're hearing them and what they're saying, there's a lot of going on about make sure you know who owns your song, okay? And if you have other writers on there, make sure that you get their permission to be able to submit those songs. And if you're with a publisher, also make sure that you have that permission. It's a lot of things that you can't just take a song unless, like some songwriters that I know out there in the audience have, again, their copyrights, their publishing, and their master owner, and they own all three. Make sure you have that information, because it could create complications down the road when you decide that you want to start doing sync placement. Even when you deal with your independent artists or independent film directors here, make sure you contact their music supervisor, as Sierra was saying, so that you're on the same page with what they need, and to make sure, because the other thing, as I learned this in Berklee School of Music, as I attended Berklee School of Music, the cue sheet, which is something that gets submitted later on, if it has an incorrect name, you're not getting paid. If it has an incorrect publisher, the money will go to somebody else, and you don't want that to happen. So have your ducks in a row, please. I encourage, as well as for the film directors, the same. If you are going to have a songwriter, someone create something for a movie, make sure that you do the right thing and get their correct information, and make sure that they've given it to you as well. But your music supervisor should be helping you with that.
Jesse, that reminds me something that I remember last year. We were working on a project that actually we had a song with 102% ownership, because actually the songwriters didn't agree, so they were fighting about the percentages. So that was crazy, because it was a very important song for this project, and until, well, the issue was solved positively, but actually everything was a battle about the percentage. So
Yeah, and that is actually something, there are clients who will opt to just say, okay, I'll pay the extra 2%. The problem is there is a liability, because if there's a split issue among the writers.
Closer, because they want to hear it.
Oh, me? I need to move closer.
You're too
Okay.
comfortable.
I guess so.
You're very
No.
important. You have important information to give.
Yeah, what we were saying is you can go ahead and, like, clients will sometimes opt to pay the extra percentage, but if they do that, there's a liability, because it could be that, you know, they don't agree to those terms, the writers subsequently. I mean, there's clearly an issue with that song, and as long as that issue remains, then there's also a liability for the studio who's used the song.
And they don't
I
want
am not an artist. I don't sing usually. I don't have my mouth up to microphones.
what your daughter does.
We'll leave that to her.
Okay, so at this time, we're going to do what's called a mock negotiation deal. Okay, you'll be able to experience the label and the publishing doing a negotiation with the ladies that are going to actually place and do the sync licensing and music licensing for a particular song or particular artist. Am I right with that, or did I get it right? She's looking at me funny. I think I got it right. So they're going to go ahead and do a mock kind of negotiation. So pay attention to what goes on, how they go back and forth, because this is also going to inform you. So on the back end, that it's just not as simple as submitting a song. There's a lot of moving parts that go on when you're going to have a song placed in a movie, in a film, in gaming, in advertising, in whatever visual media. There's a lot of moving parts. It's not just one person you're dealing with. Ladies, please go ahead and
So you want me
Do you
to
want to start?
scenario.
Okay, I'm going to start with a request. Let's say that I'm working on a project, on a production that is going to be for the network. And actually, this is going to be like a Mexican production. So I need, for the opening sequence, the opening credits, I need a song with master included, because usually we produce our masters and everything. But in this time, I would like to have this song for this is a female Mexican singer, famous. It's a famous singer in Mexico, and I would like to have that master for my opening sequence. So I need the rights, all media, in perpetuity, worldwide. And of course, I would like to secure all promotion rights. And I would like to secure as well at least 5 seasons.
5 seasons, that's right. She's not joking. We're basing this off of a real life negotiation that we did.
Yeah,
by the way.
so-
So this is, we're not going 100% in the details, but it is.
And with
True
the
story.
publisher, I would like to secure also the right to use to print for promotions, to print the lyrics for promotions. So pretty much I would like to have everything for my opening sequence.
You want it all, Gabby.
Gabby,
Yeah.
And then
Gabby always wants it all. Gabby
as a
wants
network.
out of context promos, in context promos. These are usually quoted differently or optioned out of your incidental uses or your
Yeah.
visual vocals, your background vocals, any of that.
So that way the networks is able to promote the show, very well. They are able to use the in context use of the song. But for this one, for the opening sequence, I would like to have both the in context and out of context use, because actually it's the opening sequence of the
Yeah, and
the
just so
series.
you guys understand why, as a network, why we like out of context network promotion
Yes.
is if Gabi comes to me and says, "Oh, we got this great song, but you can only do the promotion in context," that means when we cut the promos or the trailers, the song has to appear exactly in the same manner as it does in the show. So you would have to use that clip, and you can't lift the song and use the song, especially a theme song that can become, very associated with any kind of series. You want to be able to use it in other contexts, in other promotional pieces, especially when it's a series. We cut episodic promos. That means our creative on-air team will do a promotional spot. That's what we call promos, a promotional spot for each episode, right? For each weekly episode. And sometimes they want to be able to use that theme song. So if we only get in context rights, we're quite limited, or our creative team is quite limited as to when they can use that song.
So if you
Well,
want,
first of-
I mean, do you? I can start because mine's probably going to take less than yours. I'm thinking. So usually when I get that kind of request, the first question I usually ask is, what budget do you have for this? Why? Because if you're
This
looking,
is why she wanted to go first. She wanted to ask the
I
easy
want more money.
question. How much
I want more
money?
money.
She wants the money.
I want money. No, but based on that budget and what the needs are, Gabby mentioned it needs to be a Mexican genre, female artist. So I look at the roster that we currently have that fits that description. From there, we look at what the budget is, because then what I'll do is I'll start speaking with management of all of these different artists that fit that profile to see whether or not they're even interested, they'll consider it, and whether or not the budget is something that they would agree to. So that's where I start my whole process. I start speaking to the different managers, and maybe what I'll do is, Gabby, out of our 10 artists, 3 of them are interested and would fit within, your terms. I have these other 2 that want this much more for that. So see if you have any flexibility in that budget to see if you'd rather have an A artist, B artist, or C artist. These are the fees that we are willing to accept, and you tell me whether or not you would be able to be flexible enough to increase your budget. If you can't, then these are the ones that you would work with. But that's what happens on my end. I reach out to management, we speak, I come back and say these are the options that you have to work with.
So, Darlene, does that mean you're not going to give Gabby everything?
If she has the money, yes.
Of course.
And when we talk specifically about the case that we worked on, what we did also is the songwriter, she was actually hesitant at first. There were some concerns she had, and Gabby was able to provide enough information and enough of the vision, really, of the project. Beyond what was written on paper, it was the vision behind it that convinced this songwriter. Because in this case, it wasn't just a pitch they were looking for. There was a specific artist that they had in mind, and they wanted her songs. This was who was
That's the
envisioned
song.
for
Yeah.
it. It was this was the song. The budget wasn't as high as we would have liked.
Yeah.
But what we did, well, it worked.
Yeah.
What
Was
what
the artist
production-
also the composer?
The artist was
Yeah.
the sole composer. No, she had a 15% co-writer, right? I don't remember which the song was. She writes most of her stuff 100%. So I think this particular song she had a 15% co-writer. But what production did was, besides the thematic use, which had all of these rights that were requested, then there were also additional uses within the film that were licensed. So the songwriter got several songs within the film. As an artist, there was one placement,
Yeah.
but her songs were used beyond one single use. So those kinds of deals we've also done, where it's how can we make this, how can we persuade this songwriter to agree to this
And-
when somebody said on that is the song, because you had your director, your
Yeah.
producer.
And it worked out because actually being her, the songwriter and the artist, of course, the identification with the show was 100%. So using her also in different other episodes worked very well. So it was a good deal.
She was very on brand for the sound, for the messaging of the show. And it's a great
Yeah.
series.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, everything's negotiable, right?
It is.
Yes.
And it
So,
goes back to what we said at the beginning. You just need all of the information. We need to understand everybody's needs and wants. I'm sorry, I
Right.
try to remember.
But this is also a very interesting case in seeing how sometimes artists, even if the financials make sense, there still has to be some kind of emotional attachment. There's
yes.
got to be, a lot of creatives, and I'm sure most of you agree with this statement because you yourselves are creatives, you're driven by a bigger vision, a bigger emotion, what's your why. And just seeing money for some artists is enough, and for other artists, it's more than the money. They have to feel like it's the right fit for them as well. So as a network, we hate when they tell us, oh, we got to check with the artist that artist has approval, because we may just want to be able to use the song. We want to get it done quickly, and the artists don't always like the manners in which we want to use the song or the type of campaign
Exactly.
in which it's going to be used.
And the songwriter almost always has a say. The artist, the newer deals on the label usually do as well, but especially some of the older ones, they didn't. The artist did not have they signed away the right to approve, but in publishing, they almost always retain that. So oftentimes, Darlene can say yes quicker than I can say yes.
Right.
Or we've got 10, 15 songwriters.
Right.
And so then
speak
10
to
or
2
15
people, you
need to
speak to
speak.
10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even on the network side, we use a lot of popular music for the promotional campaigns of either like if there's a major, what we call a tentpole, would be like a super important series that's coming in the fall, or if there's a promotional campaign or rebranding. And there's songs that I've dissuaded our creative team from using because they have 12 composers or 8 composers with 4 publishings, because it's just that usually the time frames we're working with to clear and get the rights is usually somewhere crazy like 30 days. Or
Wow.
and we just it's just very difficult sometimes to even get a response from the publishers or and when there's that many composers, we on the legal side we would dissuade them and say, do you have a backup song? Do you have a second or third option that we can start looking at simultaneously, because it is very difficult to clear songs that have 8, 10, 12 composers.
And it's funny because this usually was just a publishing problem, because you usually have 10, 12, and before on the master side, or on our end, we would only have one artist to work with, right? But now every single song will have 2,
A
3,
collaboration.
4 featured artists. So now we're starting to face the same issues that publishing does, because it's not just one approval, one artist. We're dealing with 4 different artists that we need approval from.
Yeah, you start with 3
Yeah.
and then you have a remix of that.
Right,
So you have the
and they
first
have a
3 and the
remix,
next
like,
6, and then all of a sudden you've got 9 artists
Correct.
and they don't even fit on Spotify.
Correct.
Exactly.
So I'm going, and I keep reiterating this, especially to everybody, because the key to negotiations for your music or for directors that have a project you're working on, make sure that everything everything is in place. Okay, make sure that you know how many artists did the song, how many songwriters, who owns the publishing. And I'm going to keep reiterating, because that is going to make or break your possible deal with even an indie, okay? Because they don't want to go through the trouble, and they're on a time frame, okay? Because the movie has to come out.
And
They-
some good resources for that. By the way, Spotify has great credit information currently on most, at least on newer releases. You can always go to the PROs. It's not going to be 100%. You can't guarantee that the information is correct, but it's going to give you an idea of where you need to go to seek the approvals. All Music is another good one sometimes. It used to be much better. Spotify kind of took its place as far as having a lot of information, but to even understand who all wrote the song, because sometimes we know the song and we don't know who wrote it or who all is featured on it.
Right.
I'm going to give you another tip. Thank you, Amy. Besides Spotify, also sometimes on YouTube, you can also do a check when you click the arrow. It'll give you list the publishers if it's been uploaded correctly, and most major labels do. It'll list the publishers and tell you who owns the rights, the masters to the song. So make sure that you look there. When you do it on Spotify, make sure you go all the way to the bottom where it says share. Below, it'll say show credits, and you'll be able to see there also who owns the credits. Okay, and I have one question in referencing to getting paid as a composer or songwriter. What is money on the back end when you're doing a negotiating deal? What does that mean? I heard it a lot in a couple of negotiations. What is the money on the back end for, and what is it? Does it apply to an artist? Does it apply to the publisher? What is money on the back end?
Both.
Okay,
It
please
can
let.
be both.
Yeah, I'll normally when we talk about back ends, it's when we're engaging composers or even artists to do an original composition or original master recording as a work for hire. And what that means is, as work for hire, the studio, we own the masters, we own the composition, the publishing share. But for example, if we were to engage any of you as a composer, you still keep what they call the writer's share, which is about 50% of the income. And we own the copyright, and we keep the publisher's share, which is the other 50%, and we normally would administer it. So that back end is that 50% royalty that you'll receive as a composer, and it includes the public performance income that comes in every time that song plays, whether it's on Spotify, on a soundtrack album, on a promotional spot, on the actual series, and it also includes. I guess the public performance, and if we ever we could license that out because we now own the copyright. And then on the artist side, when we engage an artist to perform, like for example, as Gabby mentioned, many times because of budgets, they'll license the composition from Amy, but they'll have a separate artist perform and record a cover. We then that cover, the same thing, they get a royalty. So that artist and that producer, there's a negotiable, aside from the fee they get for the actual services of performing or of the actual services of producing the master, will pay a royalty. And that's like the back end. It's basically the royalty that you as a composer or performer receive.
I think of it as kind of the passive income that it continues to make. So you negotiate a license, and then there's additional income that continues to be generated. And it depends on the deal, because if you have an artist who's a union one, they can continue to make, SAG and AFTRA also. So it's you have different sources. You have the PROs paying the performance income. There can be digital.
Right, but so we call those residuals,
The residuals,
which is
yeah.
different than a back end. So a back end is when you actually have, like, when the studio is agreeing to pay you a royalty directly. But then, as Amy mentioned, there's AFM, this is American Federation of Musicians, is the musicians unions. They get, quote unquote, these residuals or reuse. They're called reuse fees. And if you're a SAG-AFTRA performer, you also get residuals and subsequent use fees. So, and you're
neighboring
totally
rights.
correct that it's like this.
Neighboring rights as well.
Neighboring rights, yeah. So it's just, it's income that like some people might refer to as the long tail. So you got paid a fee for your performance or for your composition. You may not own it, but there is sort of like this revenue that'll continue to come in, especially if the song does really well. And continues to play.
So residuals is the money that keeps on going, right? Something like that? Yeah, so look at it that way, essentially. Okay, at this time we have about 10 minutes for questions. Claudette is going to have the microphone, so please raise your hand if you have a question. That's not fair. You're sitting next to her. No,
Hello.
Go ahead.
That's
Stand
very-
up. Please stand up and introduce yourself
very
in the middle.
convenient, right?
Introduce yourself and let them know if you're a director or if you are a music creator. And go ahead.
Hello, room.
State your name, please.
I'm Ian from MATV Media. So, director, film producer, I own a talent agency. I do many things, right? So I have a TV show. This is maybe a complicated question. Maybe you guys can help me because I see you're specifically talking about movies and certain. Do I need to stand? Yeah. Okay. We're specifically talking about movies and certain things in that area, but a lot of time we do media as press. We're doing red carpet, and this is very challenging where we have a line of artists, 20, 30 artists lined up, and they're coming back to back to back, and they're doing interviews, they're dropping what kind of projects they're working on, the music that they want to shout out to the community. Now we want to air it on television. Now we want to air it on social media, whatever. And we may not be able to find all the management, they may not be there at the moment. And how do we get this, out in the community without, legal issues to play their music that they elaborated on, during the interview, and sometimes we can find some people. Sometimes I can't find them on Spotify, I can't find them anywhere, but we still want to show their work, as a whole of the production of the whole event. And because you guys deal with music, maybe you can give me some ideas of, how to handle something like this. Thank you.
Do you have thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that for you because I've done a lot of events and showcases and a lot of performances with numerous amount of artists and festivals. Okay, basically, you need to make sure before they come into your event that you do a release. Have them sign a talent release. And this releases you of any obligations in that aspect. You're going to sign a talent release, basically say that they're giving you permission. Make sure that the authorized person to give you the permission, by the way, but that they're giving you permission to be able to videotape and reproduce their performance and their song. But make sure, again, as I said, make sure that the artist may not be the one with the permission. Okay, so make sure you get everybody's permission, the label, the manager, whoever, the producer, whoever it is that owns the rights. Again, I repeat that word, the rights to the music. You get all those permission, and you send a release, and you do your homework a week before or months before. You send via email that talent release and say, look, I need the following. If they're going to perform their song or a cover or whatever they're going to perform, I need these releases prior to them being filmed.
Could I fall under the category of the event that had brought them in, and I come as a
The event coordinator,
subcontractor?
I was an event coordinator for 25 years. The event coordinator should make sure that those releases are handled and processed. Next question, raise your hand. Give that to Carmen. Please stand and give your
Hi,
name.
my name is Carmen. I'm just getting back in the scene. Jesse knows me from a long time ago. I have my own company. I was doing artist management way back then. And I want to get back into the scene, but I have a new artist here. She's a writer. She's writing her song, and I just mentioned, because you guys mentioned BMI and ASCAP, and she's just giving birth right now. So, she's new. And she has a faith-based song that she wrote, and she wants to expand it and produce it and get in the scene of, having it recorded. And just wanted to mention to you guys, is that the best route to take, the BMI and ASCAP first, and then, later on venture into what her vision and her mission is in her music industry?
So as a songwriter, so your question basically is, she's signing up with a PRO, and she wants to delve into sync placement, correct? Eventually. So she's a songwriter, she's getting her PRO, and then she wants to go ahead into sync placement. And you want to know if that's the best route for her to start with registering with her PROs, ladies?
I would definitely say that's a good place to start.
Yeah, that's
Once you have material to show, get meetings with the different, with reps at the different PROs, sit down, know your team. Know that you feel comfortable and that these are going to be people who are going to help you get to the people who need to listen to the songs, to the recordings.
because that's also how you're going to get paid. Remember, PROs, that's how you're going to get paid. Well, for PR professional performance. Okay, next, Claudette, you have Mary Beth over there.
Obviously, COVID is over because we're not worried about spit on the microphone.
They sanitize them.
Yeah, okay. So basically, I had no idea that, I'm with BMI, and I had no idea that I could actually contact a human being and say, hey, I need a team of people. I need people interested. How do I?
Where did you become affiliated to BMI? Out of Miami?
Yeah. Just, you go online and you send in your
did it online.
tunes and you just do it. I mean, it's so removed. I think the biggest issue for people who do not have management, it's you're a songwriter. You're not, I'm a performer, I'm a writer, I'm actively doing that, but this is very intimidating because all you hear is this mountain that you're not going to get up because the odds are 1,000,000 to 1 against you. So to hear that you could actually contact BMI and say, hey, I need a representative for my songs to get licensed, that seems like I can't even imagine that would happen, because that would mean millions of people are asking these PROs to rep them. How does that make,
I mean, I always recommend. I started out on the label side, and then I've worked in publishing the majority of my career. And for a long time, I had ASCAP's office down the hallway from me, and I would literally just send them over to speak to them. Currently, I don't think Miami has a BMI office, but keep your ears open. It might be coming soon.
but you can actually go to the office? I mean, aren't they say, go away, who are you?
You would call and ask for an appointment at your local office,
Yeah.
and just somebody should take your call. You would tell them you're an associate and give your number, and they should take a meeting. I can't imagine that they wouldn't. In my experience, they have. I know for sure if one of our writers asked for a meeting, somebody would give them a meeting. So I have to believe that BMI would. And the team that I know well, the team in LA, is extremely pro songwriter and getting other opportunities for them. So definitely knock on some doors. And if you're not yet affiliated, then that's also a question to say. Say, hey, I'm shopping for a PRO. I'd like to take a meeting. Be respectful of the time, try to keep it, have your questions, do your research before. That's something that everybody should try to do. Do your research, go in, but absolutely they should take a meeting.
Okay, thank you.
And we have to wrap it up because we have another panel coming up. First of all, I want to say thank you to the Miami Web Fest for allowing us to have this panel here. We're so grateful to be able to share another aspect that is linked to the film directors and the producers. And also, once again, I'm going to let you know this was sponsored by Sync Musica. I am the founder of Sync Musica, and our mission will be to be allies and facilitators. Okay, allies and facilitators for the record labels, for the producers, for the production companies, and also to represent the songs and the audio for artists, composers, mostly composers and songwriters that want to be able to get sync licensing and music placement. So earlier, I know somebody asked Amy and said, well, how do we get close to you? Well, we are giving, what Sync Musica is going to create is a connection. It's a vehicle, it's a gateway where we will have the networking and the connections and also some fabulous friends that we can reach out to, and possibly, you have to go through a membership and make sure that it is approved by our music curator, and make sure that we can pitch your music if it's suitable for the demands of the industry, of the demands of what's being looked for at the time. So I want to let you know, if you want to sign up for subscription to Sync Musica, go to www.syncmusica.com, and we have a landing page where you can sign up for membership, and somebody will reach out to you. But I would like for all of you to please give a wonderful round of applause to these amazing women. I call them the Sync Super Women of Sony. Please give them a wonderful round and a woo!